Hi, this is Charlie with Boxing Focus and an overdue video about the Tony Bellew Nathan Cleverly fight and undercard. So I'll do the main event later because I don't have too much positive to say. So we're looking at the undercard. The performance of the night was definitely James DeGale. Came in, looked hungry, sharp, focused. There was a real purpose about everything he was doing, and he gets a great stoppage over a tough guy. Saying that, I think it was a little bit more flattering than it actually looked, simply because Periban, who's he'd lost 3 times already in his career. He'd lost prior to coming into this fight. It looked like he wasn't quite there mentally. I didn't like his conditioning, the way he looked at the weigh-in. He never looks great, but I thought he looked worse than his normal standard. And just in the fight, his body language was awful. It looked like he had no belief. He was just kind of seeing if he could figure James DeGale out, and he didn't, and then he just got stopped, and he just didn't seem to want to be there. So as good as James DeGale looked, I thought Periban looked bad as well. So I think Periban perhaps could, I don't think he really showed up, and then if he was more motivated, could have done a bit better. But still, hats off to James DeGale, very impressed. George Groves, very unimpressed. He came into this fight, he started the fight rather as if he didn't know he was facing a southpaw. Like he was almost surprised. It's like, how do I fight this guy? He had no game plan. It was really, really bizarre, and he laboured for a lot of rounds. And in the end, and I didn't find this out until after the fight, George Groves' size counted, and you could see that he was a bit taller and bigger. But I didn't realise that this Duglin guy, was fighting at light middleweight. So he's basically 2 weight divisions removed from where he was fighting 6 months, a year ago. So that made George Groves' performance look even worse. And I expected George Groves to get a mid-round stoppage, and he did pull it out, but it seemed to be kind of size-induced. Really not impressed. His footwork has gone backwards. This is a guy who, you go back 3 or 4 fights, the first Carl Froch fight and the fights before that, he had great footwork. He would come in and he would come, roll into punches, come out at angles. He would be coming at unpredictable times. He would always be on the front foot with his shots. He just looked really razor sharp and dangerous. And he's turned into this guy that just kind of stands in front of his opponent. His footwork has gone completely backwards. And I've got to put that down to the training and his trainer. I think that, whereas Adam Booth is an excellent technical trainer, he's now with a guy who's just muddling through, I guess. Perhaps knows the basics, but not much more. Because George Groves does not look like he's had a good, solid game plan for a fight since he first fought Carl Froch. I thought he fought the second Froch fight horribly. Everything that was good that he did in the first fight, he didn't do in the second. I thought the Labras fight was awful. He threw nearly 1,000 punches and he thoroughly deserved the win, but technically just seems to have gone massively backwards from the George Groves that showed up to the first Froch fight or the few fights before. Just looks like he's just not really learning anymore. He was getting better, and then he's dipped, and then he's plateaued. So we'll see. I think if they fight now, I think James DeGale deals a beating to George Groves, an absolute beating. And you've got to bear in mind, their first fight, George Groves did about as well as he could. It was James DeGale who finished the fight stronger, who gave away the early rounds because DeGale had gotten in his head. Sorry, because Groves had gotten in DeGale's head. It was DeGale that could have done it. He will have looked at the tape and thought, I could have done so much better. He was the one that will have left that fight full of regret, not George Groves. So it's not like Groves won but didn't perform very well. George Groves performed about as well as he could have done in that fight. It was DeGale that failed to perform. So in a rematch, you would expect DeGale to improve massively upon his original performance, and George Groves, from the looks of it, is just going to stand in front of DeGale, and DeGale's going to beat the shit out of him. So yeah, so performance of the night to DeGale, worst performance of the night to Groves, despite getting the knockout. Anthony Joshua and Michael Sprott was a sad state of affairs. I hate those kind of fights. I wish boxing was a bit more like the UFC in terms of, you know, matching guys who stand a chance against each other. Sprott was there for a payday, didn't move, didn't do anything, just stood there, took his licks, and went home with a paycheck. And then you've got the main event, which was a snoozer for 8 rounds, and then Bellew, cleverly fights the fight with one hand. Basically, he threw that right hand so sparingly, he hurt it apparently in the 3rd round. And Bellew then, at the end of the fight, he must have known this. He's been facing it for 12 rounds. But then at the end of the fight, it's like, yeah, this puts it to bed, man. Yeah, I beat you so bad, man. So decisive, like so full of himself, and the guy had one hand. Just Tony Bellew, I don't really. He grates on me whenever he speaks. I wouldn't care for a 3rd fight. I didn't really care for the 2nd fight. I wouldn't have really watched it if it didn't have all those other fights on the undercard. So yeah, they made it out like it was the biggest fight in the cruiserweight division. Unfortunately, I think that's only true if you live in Liverpool or in Wales. I think outside of those zones, nobody really gave a shit, and nobody will really give a shit about the rugby match either. And it was a terrible pay-per-view overall. And only really entertaining fight was the DeGale fight. But there you go. Yeah, that's that, and we can look forward to the better fights, which are coming up on Box Nation. Not that I'm associated or affiliated with Box Nation, but I'm looking forward to the ones in the weekend much more than I was those that just passed. This is Charlie with Boxing Focus. Let me know if you enjoyed them and what you thought of Tony Bellew's victory.